And we'll move on to outcome 2, families and communities. Yep. We'll start with Cassius. I've just got a couple myself. So I'll kick things off on the cashless debit card. Could you give us, and I'm happy for you to be very brief, just a brief update on the Goldfields trial, where implementation is at, and any updates on number of participants, ongoing consultations, time to roll out, proposed evaluation.
Yep. Senator, the implementation of the cashless debit card in Goldfields is expected to commence in early April 2018. Due to the geographical site of the area, the implementation of the cashless debit card to all the 5 local government areas in the Goldfield regions will be staggered. The staggered implementation will involve triggering a special number of participants onto the CDC daily over a period of several weeks, as opposed to triggering all participants at the same time.
So effectively it's a staggered rollout by local government area?
Yes.
That's right, they should be by local government area or town.
Okay. And why has that approach been chosen or being used?
It's the approach that we've used in the other sites as well.
Is it the same
so
approach?
It's the same approach. It's so that we can provide support, assistance, more hands-on on those early period as we move people onto the cashless debit card.
Okay. And so you have people on the ground at the moment?
Commencing. Getting ready for this staggered implementation.
Okay. And just at the other end, in terms of the evaluation, can you talk us through what your plans are in terms of evaluation of the trial site?
We're still finalising what those arrangements are and what the administrative data that will be collected and the form of the evaluation. There has been discussions between the Minister and some other members of the Senate and the Parliament on scope of that, and we expect that to be finalised shortly.
Okay. And just finally, can you very briefly run through the difference in demographic from the currently on hold proposed trial site in the Hervey Bay Bundaberg area as compared to the 3 current trial sites?
Yes, it's Ros Baxter from Families and Communities Reform Group, DSS. So the Goldfields site mirrors the same parameters that there were in both the East Kimberley and Ceduna sites in terms of trigger payments and the people who would be expected to be on. In the Hinkler site, which as you mentioned is on hold, the plans were for those to be targeted to a different set of income support recipients. So we were looking at people under the age of 35 who were receiving working age payments, so New Start, youth allowance and some parenting payments.
And in so much as you can answer this, what was the thinking behind targeting that different cohort for?
So in each geographic location, we look at the particular nature of the demographics and also of the social harm. In the Goldfields, we were targeting very similar kinds of demographics that we had in East Kimberley and Ceduna. In the Hinkler, in the proposed but on hold Hinkler trial, the issues there that have been shown up through the statistics around social harm are around very high levels of youth unemployment relative to people in the other trial sites and certainly in the state and country more generally, and also around alcohol-related harm for young people. We have those statistics here if you want them, but that was the reason for that targeting.
That's great. Thank you very much. We'll go to...
I've got some basic number, the data questions first.
Right, do you want to do the data questions first, then we'll go to Senator Watt?
Yeah, and then I'll have more questions after that. Thank you for this. Could I ask, is it possible, or do you have the data for the number of people, we've got exemptions here from CDC, which are very low because there's very few people that have actually been exempted from a card. What I'm also keen on getting is then numbers of people that have had their proportion quarantined changed.
We have numbers here for the panel. So you're talking about people who have
For the-
applied through
who
the
have
community
applied
panel?
to the community
Yes,
panel,
you got
yeah.
those.
Is it possible to get them in future included in this, in the document? Because it is a very helpful document and that would save me having to ask.
So I'll list them by site. In Ceduna, there's been 168 people who have applied for
Sorry, Tristan, introduce yourself.
sorry,
first.
Tristan Reid, Branch Manager of the Welfare Quarantining Branch. In Ceduna, 168 people have applied to the panel. Of those, 129 have had their restricted proportion reduced, 29 have had their application rejected, and less than 5 are pending additional information. I think that's actually reduced now to 0. I don't think there's any outstanding in either site.
Can you break that down into Aboriginal participants and
We can do that, but I don't have it with me, so I might have to take that on
take
notice.
that on notice?
Yep.
And could that be included in the table in future?
Yep.
Thanks. And in EK?
In the East Kimberley, there's been 45 participants who have applied to the panel. 11 applications have had their proportion reduced, and 33 have had their application rejected. I think at the time of this brief there may have been one pending, but I don't think there is anymore. I think all applications have been considered.
What's the timing on your brief?
This was
31
as at 31 December 2017, but I'm confident that there's no outstanding applications in any panel.
Again, could you take that, take on notice the number of people who were
Yep.
Aboriginal
Yeah, we
portion
can
of
do
that? And also, you may need to take this on notice, is were those people granted what they asked for? Does that make sense?
Did the percentage reduce to what they requested?
Yes. For example, I'm aware that at least one person in Ceduna has asked for it to go down to 50%. The panel refused to do that. They changed it to 60-40.
We will be able to provide that, but I don't think I've got it with me.
Okay, if you could give us the numbers, just the breakdown on whether they got what they asked for.
Yep,
Okay.
do that.
Thank you.
Senator Watt.
Thanks. I think at least one of my questions you've just covered off. At the Senate inquiry that we held into the cashless debit card bill, the department confirmed the cumulative cost for the trials in Ceduna and the East Kimberley was about $25.5 million at that point in time. That's a few weeks ago now, from memory. What's the latest cumulative cost of the cashless debit card trials since the two trials began?
I can give you the maximum cost of the current contracts. To actually get an amount expended, I might have to take on notice. I can give you...
Would it be better if we take it on notice, Senator, if you had that number from a couple of weeks ago, was it? And we can seek to update that number.
And we'll provide that. number.
Okay, I might
Yeah.
get the figures for the total contracts though as well.
So the maximum contract value is...
I've got those ones here.
I'll just have to do a bit of maths, but if you've got
So
the
I've
total...
got the contract numbers here. So the, I think, Senator, these are the same numbers that we gave you on notice after the last, when we had
Right.
the discussion about the value of the run contract and the bill contract.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the numbers we provided you in the corrected, in the question on notice afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
So the initial cost of the 12-month trial was $17.8 million. The initial build contract was a value maximum of $2,870,675.
Yep.
The initial operational contract, $7,939,809. Then there was a variation for that second contract, to the run contract that was executed on the 20th of April. The value of the variation was $5,095,772.16. And that brought the total for that run contract to $13,035,581.16. So that was the conversation we had last time where we, in discussion, just added them incorrectly. So there is the initial 2-ish million one, the almost 8 million added to the 5 million, those two go together to the 13 million.
Okay, thanks. I think you've just given to Senator Siewert the number of participants currently part of the trial in both Ceduna and the East Kimberley, haven't you?
Did we give that in that
We've provided
document
it,
we
yeah.
tabled?
Oh, that's in that document you gave us
Yes.
earlier. Okay,
Yep.
thanks. And have you worked out then what the total cost per participant is to date?
So, Senator, we have answered this question several times.
Right.
So, we are currently looking at a cost that looks at the ongoing run cost per participant, because there are a number of costs in relation to the cashless debit card that are one-off costs that we no longer have to expend. So they are not factored into a per head participant cost. And I think at the moment it's around the $1,800 mark per participant.
Yeah, I
have
guess we
the
don't have a definitive figure at this stage,
Mm.
but if you take away the substantial upfront costs, it's below $2,000.
That has been spent to date on them?
Well, no, it's different if you take what's spent to date because of the significant upfront costs
Yeah.
to establish in the
You can't
trial.
really divorce that though from the cost of running the trial, can you? I mean, if that's part of running the program, then that's part of the cost.
Well, they are one-off costs, though, that are also not factored in when we talk about, for example, the running costs of income management. So we do try to talk about them on a comparable basis. There are obviously a number of upfront costs around income management. There are a number of upfront costs here that go to things like the build of the IT system, the evaluation, some of those setup costs, but the costs that go to running them in the communities and what it would cost if you ran it in another community, that is the cost that we're talking about.
And what's the expected cost of the Goldfields trial?
Senator, those costs at the moment I think are still not for publication because we're still in the process of conducting contractual negotiations with the provider.
Okay. And what about, I know Bundaberg and Harvey Bay for the moment aren't proceeding, but what would be the cost,
So they're in a
expected
similar
cost?
situation. So the costs that were allocated in the last budget for future trial sites were printed as not for publication because of the need for those contractual negotiations to take place.
Would you expect, though, a reasonably similar cost in terms of the ongoing running costs as what you're experiencing in those other
You would
areas?
expect it to be reasonably similar. In general, the costs have trended slightly downwards the more participants you have and the more of the upfront issues we've worked through as we've gone along with the trials.
So I take it that those big upfront costs that you incurred, they would not need to be incurred again for any additional trial sites?
That's correct, Senator.
Am I right that the Goldfields trial starts on the 1st of April?
No, that's not correct, Senator. At the moment, we've said April, early April, but we haven't given a 1 April
Okay,
start
well,
date.
early April?
Yes, and I've just explained the staggered implementation, which we'll be doing over the next few weeks by local government area.
Yeah, and you've said that you can't give me a cost for that trial because you're still in negotiations,
That's correct.
and it's only about a month away, and you haven't got a provider.
Oh, no, we're not saying we haven't got a provider. We're saying we're still in negotiations. So we, while there are some things still to be resolved, it won't be the kind of extended contractual negotiation it had to be, for example, when we first established the trial, because many of those, as we were just saying, the upfront segments of the scheme have already been developed, they're already implemented. So this is about just the costs of extending it for this trial. So that's why it's able to be done on a much shorter implementation timeframe. But we do already have, we've already had discussions with people in the local area who may be in the position of being able to be local partners on the ground. As Ms Bennett mentioned before, we have local staff on the ground beginning the process of implementation. So we are well advanced, but we just haven't finalised those contractual negotiations around the card provider.
Are you confident you're going to have them finalised in time
Yes.
for early April?
Yes.
We are.
By which time we'll be able to ask you the cost.
By May.
Why don't you take it on notice? Because by the time it comes around due for the
Well, Senator, we wouldn't want to delay any questions on notice that we were providing back.
it wouldn't be the first time.
Oh, I think you're fine.
You're better than most.
100% in on
I think everyone
time,
was better than
Senator.
George Brandis.
We're here in May, so.
We're back in May.
You're,
He got them all in right before his departure.
why don't you take it on notice? Because you've got about a month from memory, and let's hope you've got your contract signed within a month, given
So
They need to be.
there's contract signing and then there's a date on which it has to be published on AusTender, so.
How
So
soon
we'll,
that?
we'll take it on notice,
Yeah,
Senator,
take
and
it on
see how we go,
notice.
but we won't jeopardise other questions being
Okay,
delivered
and-
in a timely manner.
Okay, so we're on track for early April. Is the department aware, obviously Andrew Forrest has had a very big interest in this. Is the department aware of Andrew Forrest, the Minderoo Foundation, Generation One, or Andrew Forrest's company, Fortescue Mining Group, contributing to the wraparound services within the trial sites since the trials have been announced?
No, Senator.
Are you saying that's definitely not happening, or you're just not aware?
I'm not aware of Andrew Forrest or Minderoo being involved in the support services. Are you talking about for East Kimberley and Ceduna, or are you talking about in the Goldfields?
I'm pretty sure I'm talking about East Kimberley and Ceduna.
They haven't been involved in
No.
any
They're not.
services.
They're definitely not. And is there any plan to involve them in the Goldfields?
No.
Okay, thanks. At this point, that's probably it for cashless debit card for us.
All right, Joe, back to...
Because we have lots of questions in the rest of
I
outcome
just
two.
have one quick question, which was to seek assurance that state sources of data will be included in the evaluation.
In the data monitoring, yes.
Other questions about that will go on notice.
I apologise, I forgot to ask another question on data, which is a breakdown of the exemption numbers into Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal. You give it for the income management side of things, but not for cashless welfare card.
If we record them, we'll definitely provide them. I'm not 100% certain we record them that way, but if we do, we can provide those.
The exemption.
The exemption.
The exemption, the exemptions.
Well, we're not
So there's
sure
the
if we
exemptions and there's the community panel.
We can-
Now, you do provide them in the document for granted exemptions for IM.
Okay, then we'll...
Okay.
So for CWC, could we have
Okay.
have
See
that?
what we can do.
Okay, thank you. Can I go back and ask again around panel makeup? Is it possible now to get the makeup of the community panel? Who's on these community panels?
You have asked us that before.
I know, and I'm going to keep asking.
And our answer's probably not going to change.
You're still going to have these anonymous group of people making these decisions.
But our answer hasn't changed from the last time you asked the question.
What about in the
Senator.
Goldfields? What are you
Well,
doing?
we haven't worked that out yet.
Are you
That's
having a
the
community
component.
panel?
There's no decision yet on whether there will be a community panel in Goldfields. That's something for the community to decide.
And
We've
how's
had
that
this-
process going to work? How's that process going to work?
The process
The
of talking
process
to
of
the...
decision making for the community panel.
We've had some discussions with the community about whether they would be seeking a community panel. Our understanding at this stage is that they are not seeking a community panel.
That's right, at this
So
stage.
who will be making those decisions about lowering altering the quarantined amount?
So if there's not a community panel in place, Senator, there won't be that capacity for there to be a mechanism for it to be altered. You would still have the mechanisms in place around exemptions, which are dealt with between the two departments, but you wouldn't have that process for a community panel making those decisions about lowering the amount.
So tell me the process by which you've convened this community group that's made this decision, and do they understand that they'll be stuck on 80-20?
So, Senator, we've had very many discussions with the people in the Goldfields community who make up the local community reference groups, and I think there are 4 of them in the Goldfields community, 4 different reference groups. We've absolutely explained to them how panels operated in the other locations, what it is they do, and the implications of not having a panel in place. All of that's been explained as part of the operations.
Okay. Can you give us the names then of the 4 community reference groups?
We'll take that on notice.
Of
Yep,
who's
we'll
on
take that
those?
on notice.
We'll take that on notice.
How often they meet?
Yep, we'll take it on notice.
Names, locations, how often they meet?
So I can give you some of that, if that would help. I've got the dates of when the reference groups have met. So for the Goldfields working groups, we know that the Coolgardie LGA and Kalgoorlie Boulder LGA met on the 14th of November, 5th of December, 16th of January and 20th of February.
So these are local, when you say LGA, are these actually the local government members? Is that who you
No,
refer to?
not just local government members. These are implementation working groups that have been established per LGA. So There's 4
So-
in total that have been established, but they're not made up of just representatives from the local government.
So they include local government, service providers, and people from the local community and the business community.
What about people that are actually going to be put on the card?
We'd have to take on notice the membership
So
for you.
You
Senator.
haven't insured, you can't tell me right now that you've insured that there's actually representatives of people who are on income support that are on these reference
Senator, I
panels.
can tell you, and we've listed before in this place, the very many numbers of consultations, discussions, meetings and working groups we've had that have included people who would be affected. I can't tell you right now whether any of those people are on these working groups. We can get back to you
That's
on
what
that.
I'm specifically asking about. This is affecting their lives, and for a community working group, I would have thought at a very minimum you would have somebody, at least somebody, and I prefer more, who are actually going to be subject to the card.
I understand the question. We'll come back.
Okay, thank you. If you could take that on notice, the reference groups that therefore are these are also operating in Ceduna and East Kimberley, separate to the panels, community panels.
That's right.
They're still operational.
Yep. Yes, that's right.
Okay, could you give us the names for who's on those?
We'll take that on notice
And
as
East
well.
Kimberley and Ceduna.
We'll take on notice to provide you what we can.
Okay, thank you very much. I know that we've got lots of time, so I'm rushing through this, sorry. Can I go back to the evaluation process? If I understood Ms Bennett, in answer to the questions from Senator Brockman, is it correct to understand that you are still working out what the evaluation process is going to be from here on in?
Yes.
Okay, so AREMA's no longer going to be doing any further evaluation?
No decisions.
I don't think we've said that, Senator. I think what we've indicated is that this is an opportunity for us to review how the evaluation goes forward into the future.
Sorry, I was just about to refine that when you clarified that. Their current evaluation process has finished.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so what...
But as we responded to Senator Pratt, we continue to collect the administrative data to monitor for Ceduna and East Kimberley to give a longer indication of those factors in the administrative data. So that continues to be collected. We've always said that. We're now working out what our next steps will be for evaluation for the Goldfields.
Okay, and you also answered the question in terms of collecting the state data for the Goldfields. So you are the body responsible for collecting that data at the moment, but there'll be no evaluation process started or in place by the time Goldfields starts.
We're working very quickly on finalising what those arrangements will be.
And we're conscious that there are many opinions on how the evaluation process should run.
Oh, yeah. So have you done I'm trying to phrase this so it doesn't sound stupid, but there is a great deal of criticism. I'm aware that, that's in the eyes of the ears of to those that listen. You'll be aware there's a lot of criticism around the AREMA evaluation.
We're aware there's been comment around the AREMA evaluation.
I stand by my comment. There's a lot of criticism of that.
So the comment sometimes has come from people who also provide evaluation services. So we're very conscious that there are different views on how evaluations are best run, Senator.
We have undertaken a detailed review internally of the evaluation.
Is that available? Is your review publicly available?
When I say review, we've looked at lessons learned in terms of
What
how it
are
might
the
inform future evaluations of this initiative and others.
What are the lessons learned?
Have we finished that review yet?
No, we're
still undertaking that review.
In terms of an important element, we'll be collecting the administrative data that's underway as a baseline for the ongoing monitoring and evaluation.
When is that lessons learned process going to be finished?
Well, it's an ongoing process, Senator, in terms of looking at this evaluation and all the evaluations we undertake.
So is it going to be finished by the time Goldfield starts? To get back to, is there
Will
going to be a
inform-
proper process in place as the Goldfield starts?
The review process would inform the future evaluation.
So when you say a proper process, we are reviewing what's happened to date, what happened with the previous evaluation, how we set up the evaluation going forward with Goldfields.
That's correct.
That's the extent of the lessons learned.
No, I think we were talking about the fact that there is a lessons learnt and it's a continuous improvement process. Everything we do, we look at to see whether that was right, whether we got some things right, whether there are areas for improvement. And I think that's what we've just been talking
That's
about
what I'm talking
under
about.
the evaluation, the AREMA evaluation.
Okay, so I go back to my question then. Is that going to be completed before, I'll pause that question a second. I understood from Ms Campbell what you said, and that you are aiming, or I took what you were implying is you're aiming to ensure that an evaluation process starts when the trial starts, or is in place, or is that
Senator,
a misinterpretation of what was implied?
Senator, I think there's a bit of a mixed view on, as my secretary said, is that evaluation, we're working out the parameters of it so that it can effectively be in place to look at the trial in the Goldfields. If you're saying on day one of something, is there something called, there will be the parameters, there will be administrative data, there will be a different evaluation and a methodology that will be developed that allow us to have a proper evaluation for the Goldfields. And that's what the answer is.
So
It's not a this date
that-
or a next date.
Okay.
It is saying that we know how long the trial is in the Goldfields, commencing sometime in April, going to 30 June 2019, and there will be an evaluation undertaken for that Goldfields trial.
But it won't necessarily be in place by the beginning of the trial, so you're collecting a bunch of administrative data and hopefully that'll meet the requirements for the evaluation.
I think the collection of the administrative data is important to be continued because that's administrative data that shows what happened in Ceduna and East Kimberley, and it's administrative data that allows us in a third trial site to actually be able to say, this is what happened in this site, that's what happened in that site, and that happened in that site. The other components about what other information an evaluator may gather, either from the sites that we have or baseline data, they're all part of how we're working very quickly on our next stage of evaluation so that we can evaluate the Goldfields site from the time that the trial starts until 30 June 19. And that's not unusual that you would be, so, you know, we're getting this ready, we're organising the components, we're making sure that we don't lose the administrative data, and then that forms and it feeds into an evaluation.
Yeah, I'm going to run out of time. I'm not going to continue to have a cross-here argument about how you do proper evaluation of so-called trials, but if I was taking this sort of thing to a university and trying to get ethics approval and I didn't have my evaluation process in place, I doubt that I'd get approval for it.
But it's not a university project.
No, I
we're
know,
running.
but you're calling it a trial.
Yes, but it's not a university project and it doesn't need an evaluation in that same way. We're working through it quickly.
Yeah, I won't. You probably can take my viewpoint from the argument, the discussion. Can I ask, therefore, can I go back to that question of, will the lessons learned be publicly available once it's completed?
We'll take that on notice.
Okay. Thank you. In terms of then the east, so we've been talking about the Kimberley for the east, the Goldfields, for the East Kimberley and Ceduna, there is ongoing data collection and monitoring in what respect in terms of
The administrative data
okay.
The administrative data, which I think there's been some public commentary that wasn't long enough, and there were two reasons for that. I mean, the Ceduna trial went for a period, East Kimberley came on later, and we continue to gather and as we can and work as hard with the states on their administrative data as well as the data that we have. We have administrative data from our department that relates to payments. We have information by service providers, and there is other data such as access to police reports and hospital admissions that we work with the states on their cycle. And for the next until June to when East Kimberley and Ceduna will continue to collect that administrative data, and we will have a better longitudinal understanding of movements in that administrative data.
So who does that evaluation of that?
Our department will collect the data.
So there's no plan to get
Commission, no.
to commission any more evaluation of those two?
No, that evaluation has been completed. The continuation of the collection of the administrative data and the monitoring and showing trends, obviously, I believe will probably be of interest into the Goldfield evaluation, and that obviously will form part of the baseline of what happened in those sites that will inform some of the trends that might emerge in the Goldfields.
Okay, thank you. One more question, and I'll put others on notice, and that is about the speculation that there will be more legislation introduced around the Hinkler trial. Is there a timeline? Is that correct speculation? And if so, is there a timeline?
I think there's been public comment.
Yes.
I don't think we can add anything more to the
No, what
public
the
comment.
Minister
The
said.
Minister said something publicly. I don't think we have a timeline. No,
Are you actively working on that potential trial site?
That was one of the trial sites that was in the previous legislation, so work had been underway on that, and I think...
But are you actively working on it now?
When you say actively working...
So are you preparing, gathering more data, whatever you need to be doing, talking to Inju provider about...
We
that?
still have engagement, given the Minister's announcement that the government intends to continue to explore the Bundaberg Harvey Bay area. We still have strategies of engaging and keeping those communities informed of developments.
Thank you.
So, sorry, where are we going now, Senator Pratt?
I'm still on 2.1, but
At a different area?
yes, definitely.
So did anyone have any cashless debit questions?
Cashless debit, no.
No.
But
Okay.
2.1,